Treasury, Internal Revenue Service. And Bill, where does your piece of paper come from?
Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service.
All right. Now, that's where it's published. However, you know, ladies and gentlemen, we've been reading that upside down for the last 50 years, or at least I have. When we read that, what comes into our mind? Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service. Maybe I can explain it to you this way. Suppose you are my gatekeeper. I have a corporation. The name of the corporation is ABC Incorporated. I come down to you as my gatekeeper and I say, look, from now on, anytime you want to correspond with anybody outside of this corporation, I want you to have stationery that says Department of Defense, ABC Corporation. Is that legitimate?
That's legitimate.
Legal?
Legal.
And from now on, that's what you're going to do, right?
That's right.
Because that's your job. Okay? Now let's suppose that you are my accountant, or you're in charge of all finance in my corporation. And so I bring you into my office and I say, from now on, every time you write a letter out to anybody outside ABC Incorporated, I want you to have on the top of your letter, Department of the Treasury, ABC Incorporated. Would you do it? Yeah. Is it legal? How many corporations in the United States have a Department of the Treasury? They all do, don't they? They all have a Department of the Treasury. They're called different things, but they all have a Department of the Treasury. Is it possible that the Internal Revenue Service has a Department of the Treasury? We know the United States government has a Department of the Treasury, right? But is it possible that the Department of the Treasury that is presented here on this piece of paper is different than the federal government? Okay, let me present this to you. If it was from the federal government, it would say the Internal Revenue Service is part of, that being silent, the Department of the Treasury of the United States of America. Wouldn't that be easy? But notice how they say it. Would you read the statement again? Where's it from?
Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service.
Okay, do they have enough room there to say of the United States of America?
Yes.
They've got plenty of room, right?
Yes.
Okay, and what about yours? It's from where?
Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service.
Does it say of the United States of America?
No, we're on there.
No. Let me ask you, if you go to a military base, what would you see stamped on the side of a Jeep?
U.S. Army.
United States government property, right?
Property of the United States.
Okay. If you went to a national park, what would you see stamped on the side of the latrine? U.S. Forest Service or government property. Isn't that right? Okay, you see, the United States government is going to stamp their name on everything that they own. If you go into an official or a government building, what do you see stamped on their pencils? Property of the United States government, right? All right. You see, they are going to stamp their name on everything. But notice, they haven't stamped their name on these pieces of paper. They say Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service. We have been reading it upside down. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's another way to find out if the IRS is part of the federal government. How about asking them? Is that all right? Okay, let's ask them. I'm going to submit to you, Bill, a letter. First of all, would you read the bottom part of the letter, the part that is marked?
The parentheses.
Yes.
All offices attached to the seat of government shall be exercised in the District of Columbia and not elsewhere except as otherwise expressly provided by law. July 30th, 1947.
Okay. Now, what we have here is a law that's on the books. It says all offices of the federal government will function only one place. That's in Washington, D.C., unless there is a law that gives them permission. That law is there for a certain reason. In 1776, we, the people, established a Constitution of the United States. We established the Constitution of the United States, but that Constitution of the United States didn't give us rights. It recognized certain inalienable rights. These inalienable rights were from God. The Constitution of the United States recognized that we were sovereign citizens, and as sovereign citizens, we had the freedom of press, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, we had the freedoms that all sovereign citizens had, all potentates, all kings had. And that was the right to own property and so on. We, the people, established at that time states. And keep in mind that a created cannot be greater than the creator. Therefore, the states were not greater than the people. Then the people donated a parcel of land. And that parcel of land was 36 square miles, and it became Washington, D.C. And then we, the people, put the federal government into Washington, D.C. And we drew a fence around Washington, D.C. and told the federal government to stay there. And in fact, if we want to communicate with you, we will come to you. And you're not allowed out of that place unless we give you permission by law. Now, let's read that statement again and see if that's just what we're talking about.
All offices attached to the seat of government shall be exercised in the District of Columbia and not elsewhere except as otherwise expressly provided by law. July 30, 1947.
Okay. Is that what it says? All right. Now we're going to read a letter written where we're going to ask them to interpret that letter for us. Would you read the body of that letter?
The back side or the front?
Right here.
Okay. This is the attention of Mr. Malcolm P. Bennett, Disclosure Officer. Gentlemen, my previous letter of 9/11/89 is cited herein as stating my Freedom of Information Act request status and made a part hereof. I have just today discovered 4 United States Code, Section 72, a most interesting little paragraph. A copy is enclosed for your convenience. Arguendo for the
Let's
most...
assume that.
Okay. I will stipulate that the IRS may be a part of the government. Accordingly, would you please send to me a copy of the documentation that is otherwise expressly provided by law, which authorizes the IRS to exercise its authority outside of the District of Columbia. Very truly yours, Ross Upton.
Is that a very simple letter? Okay, we're asking them to give us more information. A disclosure officer has the obligation to give us the information under the Freedom of Information Act. So would you turn the piece of paper over and would you read the answer we received back from them?
March 16, 1990. Dear Mr. Upton, this is in response to your request for information dated February 9, 1990 and received in this office February 22, 1990. You have requested a copy of a document which authorizes the IRS to exercise its authority outside of the District of Columbia. We have no records that are responsive to this request. Sincerely, Malcolm C. Bennett, Disclosure Officer.
Anybody like to interpret that letter for me?
Saying they don't have.
Basically, what the letter is saying is either the IRS is part of the federal government. If they are, they don't have the authority to function outside Washington, D.C. Or the IRS is not part of the federal government. And if they're not part of the federal government, being a private entity, they have the right, just as you have the right, to function any place in the United States, to do what they're supposed to do, and that's basically to collect money for the people they're contracted to. Therefore, the IRS is going to do their legitimate job of collecting money for the Federal Reserve Board. You see, this is the way the Constitution of the United States is written. We, the people, organized states, and the federal government is under that. This is the way we're being taught. The United States of America is made up of a whole bunch of states, and the states have within it the people. Therefore, the people have the obligation of supporting the states, and the people have the obligation of supporting the United States of America, or Congress. If the people don't do that by taxes, then the United States of America is simply going to fall apart. And as long as they have us believing that, then we become subservient to the states by state taxation and subservient to the United States of America by the same taxation. Then we actually become workers of the United States government by taxation.